And this is the first election in this district seat under the new single-member district system that voters approved earlier. So all three candidates are with us, and I'll just introduce them in alphabetical order, the way they'll appear on the ballot. With us today are Reinaldo Diaz, Greg Richter, and Anthony Segrich, all three candidates for District 4. Thanks a lot to all of you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, great. I'm going to begin with a question for Anthony Segrich. One of the questions we always ask on our candidate questionnaires in every race is some version of, what distinguishes you most from your opponent, or in this case, opponents. There's three of you. And Mr. Segrich gave a very detailed answer on that, and I want to cut right to the chase. He spoke, Mr. Segrich wrote more about you, Mr. Diaz, than about Mr. Richter. And he said, and I quote, Reinaldo Diaz feels it's the government's job to residents what to do in their own backyard. He wants to find ways to prevent people from moving here and rehabilitating homes because he feels that it increases their value beyond where he can personally afford to buy them. He goes on to talk about the fact that you are you're a no-show at meetings. He is known for not showing up as a board liaison. Mr. Segrich, I'm going to give you the chance to elaborate on what you said in the questionnaire. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, one can go and check the city commission recordings to hear him talk about the housing prices and his opinion that he feels that when people move to the city and rehabilitate homes, it artificially inflates the prices, and he doesn't think that's right and wants to figure out ways to stop that. The elementary school had prepared for a month for him to come and talk about civics, and he was a no-show. Kind of a disappointment. A common theme that I've heard when talking to constituents has been that emails go unanswered, phone calls unreturned, and just generally unresponsive. And, from where I sit, it's the commissioner's job to work for the people. We need to listen to the people. We need to be responsive. We need to be organized. And we have to show up and do so.
All right. Thank you for that. I'm going to give you a chance to respond, Mr. Diaz. Before I do, I want to see if we can address the extraneous audio, ambient noise I'm picking up. Dan, do you hear what I'm hearing?
Yes. If y'all could keep your mics muted while you're not talking, that would certainly help matters, I'm sure.
Yeah, keep your audio on your phone or computer muted until you're called upon, and I give you my strongest assurance. We're not going to spring questions on somebody, and catch you unaware with your mic off. I'll make sure you're known. So you're next, Mr. Diaz. You've just heard what Mr. Segrich has said about your attendance record and your responsiveness. What would you say?
All right. I mean, that's typically when I run for things, I like to run for stuff instead of against, but here we are. So there's a lot to unpack there. As far as attendance, I haven't checked recently, but I remember in the last campaign, attendance was brought up because that's kind of like a tried and true tactic that people use. And there was a spreadsheet that was made of our meeting attendance, and I'm pretty sure I was the one who had the best attendance of everyone. There have been meetings that I have missed, like recently, like last week I was in surgery, so I had a education task force meeting that I was supposed to facilitate that I wasn't able to attend because of that. There was a TPA meeting that I had to miss because of that. Stuff does happen for sure. And, we best accommodate that in terms of responses to emails and phone calls. That's another tried and true attack, right? That usually has no base, but it's a dependable tactic to use. And the reality is, Mr. Segrich, he has contacted me a lot in the past. And quite frankly, I don't think he is upset at lack of response. I think he's upset at the response because on multiple occasions, there's two main issues on artificial turf and on short-term rentals that he cares very passionately about, which I appreciate. But he definitely, likes to come in and presents his interpretation of our LDRs and our ordinances, and quite frankly, they have been incorrect. Just in the last meeting, for example, Mr. Segrich has been pushing a narrative that on artificial turf, that our city has been going after people with artificial turf, and they're not against code, but these people, and there's many of them, are getting liens on your houses. Well, at our last meeting, we had to highlight through our city attorney that there are only 2 people who have liens, and they weren't even related necessarily to the artificial turf. It's because there were a number of other issues that accumulated and resulted in the lien. So there is definitely an issue with truth. What else am I missing that he decided to attack me on? Oh, the affordable housing. What we have on short-term rentals, I suspect you'll have a question about this later. Our city has an ordinance that isn't great, because what it is an outright ban on rentals that are less than 60 days. And of course, the problem with that is our state legislature has since taken our home rule ability to regulate that. And so right now we're at a crossroads. It's either get rid of that 60-day rule and allow them 100% carte blanche, or keep the rule that we have until we get some flexibility. And I'm in the camp of keep the rule that we have until we get some flexibility, because in terms of how that affects housing, what we're having is Mr. Segrich and his business partners are acquiring properties throughout the city, and they're doing well. I applaud them for that. But the reality is you have houses in Lake Worth Beach that are 900 square feet on a 25-foot lot, right? Our famous cottages.
Okay.
And they're going for $500,000-$600,000, and people are buying them in cash. And what that does, when you're buying especially half a dozen of these things at a time,
Okay.
you're removing inventory from people who are seeking long-term housing.
All right. Thanks. We'll get back to that. I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to keep.
Yeah, no problem. There's a lot to answer.
Am I right that the 60-day rule that the city has adopted, or a 60-day ordinance, is out of line with state law? Am I right?
Right, but the 60-day rule predates the state law, so it's grandfathered in. It was long before that's not the way I would have gone. I actually like Airbnbs. Generally, when I go and have a meeting in other places of state, I try to stay at an Airbnb. I generally prefer the owner-occupied ones, because then that allows a family, for example, to have housing and have an additional income. But yeah, it predates the statute.
Okay. I don't want to
If
leave
I
Mr.
can
Richter.
clarify on that a little.
I'm going to give you a chance to respond, Mr. Segrich, I promise, but I want to bring Mr. Richter into the conversation briefly. He's on the ballot. He's a candidate. Mr. Richter, do you have anything that you can succinctly say? What is your assessment of, you wouldn't be running for this seat if you were happy with Reinaldo Diaz's record. So what do you have to say about it?
I mean, I'm running for this seat because, I want to talk about why I'm running for the seat. I've been a neighborhood volunteer. I've been a volunteer in this city for the 7.5 years that I've lived here. I think what Mr. Segrich was elaborating, and everybody has this complaint about Reinaldo, is just his lack of involvement in the community. I've talked to business owners, homeowners, and most of them don't even know who our commissioner is. And I certainly, as a president of the Homeowners Association in the past, our city commissioner came to almost every meeting. Reinaldo has maybe come to 4 or 5. I've left them a standing invitation since I've been president of it, but it's just, missing in action, and he has his own priorities, and his priorities, I don't think, are in sync with the community.
Okay, what's the Homeowners Association you're president of?
I'm president of South Palm Beach Neighborhood Association. The city is broken up in a group of neighborhoods, and we all have our own association. We do a lot of volunteer work in the city. We do a lot of communication with each other in the city to just, help this city grow and thrive.
Greg, do you recall in the last city election, if you do recall, when this district race was on the ballot, I think probably as a citywide district, it wasn't a district, it was just a commission seat.
Correct.
Did you vote for Mr. Diaz or for one of his opponents?
I voted for his opponent.
Okay. Mr.
And
Segrich,
one of the
go ahead. I'm sorry. Yep.
I'm going to finish one thing.
Yes.
One of the things that came up in that, and it's a small thing, but it's huge. Commissioner Robinson, who was before us, every Wednesday had a coffee with the commissioner. It used to be in a coffee shop. Then it went on. Then it went online. As a 1 hour web call, and it was asked to the candidates in the Bryant Park Neighborhood Association meeting, will you continue? And Reinaldo said he would continue it, and that he certainly has not done. And that was, because that was a great way, and I can tell you, I will do that because it brought everybody in from different viewpoints, all in one place, and it was a great forum. And I'm very disappointed that went away.
Okay, I'm going to call on Mr. Segrich very quickly here, but I do want to give Mr. Diaz, I'll give you 30 seconds. That very specific thing that Richter just said, which is you pledged to continue these coffee meetings and didn't.
Sure. I pledge to try and do the best I can to continue it for sure. There are a number of these neighborhood associations. There's a lot of people, and then there's even more people in our community who don't participate in the neighborhood associations. We often look for the most effective means of communication, things like social media, having dependable people in the community to help relay messages. What Mr. Richter doesn't tell you is he did things like ban me from their neighborhood association Facebook page because they wanted to limit it to residents only and exclude their elected officials. So it's really hard to be an effective representative of everyone in the community when you have 24 hours in a day and you're fielding 20 or 30 phone calls a day on top of your weekly meetings with staff. I will also point out their neighborhood association meetings are on Monday evenings, which overlap generally with my staff meetings with city management.
Okay. Mr. Segrich, I'm going to give you the floor to respond to what you've heard. Go ahead.
So just touching upon the short-term rentals, it really highlights a general problem that the city has been having with some of the interpretations of its code, its municipal code, and legal interpretations. They got in hot water with the panhandling issue, where they passed code that got them sued and lost. As far as the grandfather clause goes, it stipulates that a section of code cannot really be changed since the time it was implemented. And our short-term rental regulations, if you even want to call them that, it's more of an interpretation of the code, has been changed substantially 3 times. And since 2011, when this first came out, it's been challenged. The city has tried to enforce it, and they always roll back for some reason. And since 2011, they've never enforced it. And the plain and simple truth is this: the basis on which they claim to have a grandfather clause is legally shaky at best. The other aspect of it is the short-term rental industry brings in over $110 million of tourist revenue into the Lake Worth Beach area per year. We pay over $1.6 million in taxes to the county in terms of bed tax and TDT tax. All of this is going back into the community. The last time the city tried to enforce it, 119 business owners signed a petition to say, please don't do this. It's vital for our business. So of course I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about our downtown. I'm passionate about tourism. I'm passionate about the vitality of our city.
Understand. Clarify one thing for us, because Mr. Diaz sort of alluded to it. Are you and your business partners, are you in the vacation rental business?
My wife and I own and operate a single vacation rental. And
you
it's
also have had.
What about your treasurer?
Did you not interrupt? I operate a vacation rental with my wife, and it's probably the only reason why we and many of the other vacation rental owners can afford to live in a beautiful city like Lake Worth Beach.
You also have campaign donations from other rental property owners, right?
I do.
Okay. You mentioned that the grandfather clause for rental properties in Lake Worth's ban on them, or time frame ban on them, is legally shaky. The state law that got rid of home rule for a lot of Airbnb regulations specifically mentions grandfathering in laws that were passed prior to that state law. So how is this legally shaky?
Because there's no specific law. It's an interpretation of the code that they're claiming. The specific paragraph that they reference, transient public housing, I have confirmation from William Waters, doesn't even relate to residential properties in the 2011 version. In the 2012 version, it was changed to reference residential properties and added the 60 days. Later on, it was then changed again to add a 30-day exemption for 4 units or less residential. So even if you can say that the grandfathered clause did exist, it is substantially and materially changed over time, which the Attorney General and the Supreme Court have held up, saying that when you substantially change it, you lose that grandfathered clause. Our own city attorney said, if we substantially change that clause, we lose it. So, you know, all I've been asking for years is for our city attorney to please ask the Attorney General of the state of Florida for an opinion whether or not that our grandfather clause, as we suppose it exists, actually will hold up to legal scrutiny. And
if it's up to you, should you be elected, if it's up to you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if it's up to you, you'll get rid of it entirely, right? I mean,
if it's up to me, I want to see common sense regulations. So we have a real chance now to regulate short-term rentals. If we take a strong stance and the grandfather clause gets nullified by the courts, how hard do you think it will be to get short-term rental owners to agree to regulations? We have a chance now to preserve something that brings in $100 million a year to our economy, is vital for our business owners, and really isn't a source of many problems within the city. So, you know, through strong regulation, working with PBSO, working with the neighborhoods, we can have a chance to actually regulate these things smart and have them be good neighbors for all.
All right, Steve, sorry to interrupt your line of questioning there. I just wanted to follow up with that.
No, that's fine. That's great. I want to switch to Greg Richter for a second and ask Greg something that came up on the questionnaire briefly.
Sure.
Greg, how well has the city of Lake Worth managed and is managing the restoration of the Gulfstream Hotel project?
I think the Gulfstream Hotel project is coming along. I think there was a lot of unnecessary delays put together by the city commission, you know, through the whole process. I mean, everyone followed the lead of Commissioner McVoy, including Commissioner Diaz. Never really spoke out anywhere to the community, to anybody, about his opinion, other than he told me one day he was happy that they were saving the 3 trees that they asked for. And it's been tough. It's a tough place to develop, but we fortunately have a developer here that has persevered and gone through, and this project will be done. But I was not happy when they brought in an outside consultant to evaluate the original bid, and they got an answer from it. Well, they didn't like the answer, so they went and hired another one and delayed it. So it was just, you know, a lot of delay, and then finally when they finally voted for it. And that was pressure from the citizens. The citizens put the pressure on the commission to get this thing done.
Okay. By the way, professionally, Greg Richter, you too are in the real estate industry, right? Am I right?
I am. I mean, my background, I've had a real estate license for since 2000 or late 2019 when I retired from 40 years in the housewares industry. The last year really the last year, I really kind of backed off, and I'm now going to suspend my real estate status, and I'm going to just go to a referral status because I'm ready to become a full-time commissioner. I got the time and I can do it.
Tell us one, you know, in a minute or less, tell us one fundamental way you'd be a different commissioner than Reinaldo Diaz.
I would be out in the community every day. You know, I will be involved in the meetings around the different neighborhoods. You know, I will be talking to the business I'm up and down Lake Avenue all the time, personally, and you know, gotten to know a lot of the business owners, and we'll, have someone that they can talk to, because I can't tell you the number of doors I've knocked on business owners over the last 2 years that have said they've never heard from anybody from our commissioner. And one in particular who just opened a really great new business here said she tried several times to reach out to Reinaldo and never heard from him, because the one consistent thing you hear in this city is dealing with our process of permitting and code. It's a broken system, and that I've heard consistently from both homeowners and from businesses.
What about permitting is broken? What is it specifically that's broken?
Well, you go apply for a permit, and it's the application starts, the process starts moving forward, and then someone looks at a design and says they don't like it. You need to correct it. So it goes back to either the contractor or the homeowner. They make the correction, but then it starts the process all over again. You go back into permitting. They go forward. Well, someone else may take a look at it and say, well, I don't like this. And it goes back to the homeowner. So, I mean, I've talked to people that, one person was trying to put a shed in their backyard, a legal shed that was all part of code. It took them a year to get a permit. I mean, it's crazy.
Okay.
And I hear this consistently.
Mr. Diaz, is there a real problem with permitting in Lake Worth Beach?
Oh, for sure. It's not quite how Mr. Richter explains it. Let's rewind back to the Gulf Stream. There is actually something delaying the project. It wasn't me. Keep in mind, when I came into office, this process was already well on its way. I think I had like the last 2 votes or of it. I never commit to saying, am I all in for a development project until I have the application in front of me and we're at the public hearing? No, because that would be ex parte communication. And I like to be careful about whether I'm for or against something up until it's, their chance to be heard at the hearing. Now, as far as the delay, the thing that's delaying the project right now is actually months ago, almost a year at this point. Our staff explained to the developers of the Gulfstream Hotel that they need to preemptively start communicating with Florida DOT to work on the necessary work on the undergrounding infrastructure that's going to connect to the hotel. They refused to do that. They thought that it was like Missouri, their home state, and it shouldn't be a problem. No matter how many times we told them, you really got to get in early. FDOT has a slow response rate. And lo and behold, came down to it's time to work on that infrastructure. And DOT said, no, you're not. You're nowhere near through this process. And we've been waiting for that response. And that's the true delay on the project. Other than that, it's still on schedule, even with that delay.
Okay.
And gosh, and in regards to the permitting, we definitely, there's definitely room for improvement. You guys know my background is in land use with a land use law degree, and I use that to do environmental lobbying work, which of course Sun Sentinel has covered. Yes, there is room for improvement. Our code, just like many others, our code is fairly protective of its community. Okay. And so sometimes there's quite a few requirements, and there does need to be improvement. And so we've already made moves to improve that process. We're already in a process of putting out an RFQ to look at law firm, nonprofit, somebody who can take a look at our LDRs and start kind of ironing out the kinks.
LDRs, those are what?
Land development regulations. So, you have your comp plan and then your LDR.
I'm going to ask you to pause right there. Okay. Yep. Thanks very much. I wanted to circle back to Mr. Segrich for a second. But I want to, hold on. We're getting extraneous audio again. Okay. I want to continue, but it's not always possible to hear everybody. I'm going to give Mr. Segrich the floor for a moment. But I want you to, if I heard Mr. Diaz correctly, Anthony, the delays in the Gulfstream Hotel project aren't the city's fault. They're the fault of the Florida Department of Transportation, among others. Go ahead.
So before jumping into the Gulf Stream, I think it's interesting. Mr. Diaz brought up that he has a land use background and went to school to study land use law. One of the common themes, as Greg reiterated, many of our business owners are having problems with just that, and they can't get a response from them. Why is Mr. Diaz, helping an environmental lobby when he's not even helping his own residents or businesses? It's very frustrating. In terms of the Gulf Stream, you have to look at it as two separate phases. One was the phase of getting the Gulf Stream actually approved and on the schedule of development. In that process, the city commission that Reinaldo Diaz and Mr. McVoy were a part of did delay that process. They put them through the ringer. The public meetings, the outrage, it was real. It's not imagined. We can't sweep it under the rug. The people were outraged for a reason, and it was largely because of the delays and resistance that were coming from Reinaldo and Mr. McVoy. The deal was changed on the developers several times. Now, the second part of it, Ronaldo's right. Once they got into the building phase, it's out of the hands of the commission. It's now between the developer and our, code compliance and planning and zoning and so on. I can't speak to the communications that they've had between those, and there have been some delays, and he is accurate. A large part of it right now today is about utilities and underground. But in terms of actually getting the project here, we almost lost them. We waited how many years to have the Gulf Stream come back to our city, and we almost lost it because the commission could not get it done, and they delayed even getting the project approved. And I think that was the point that Greg was alluding to, and that many of the residents in Lake Worth would resonate with.
Okay. I'm going to step back here and open the floor to my colleague Pat Beal or to Dan Sweeney for questions. Try to be as concise as you can in your answers, because we've got three of you guys and we don't have unlimited amounts of time. So go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I'm starting with Mr. Diaz. What is the district that you're going to be representing now if you're reelected? What does it actually look like demographically? How many businesses are there? What types of businesses? What does the housing stock look like? And what are the actual demographics?
That is
who are you going to represent? Yeah.
That is a great question. So the district now, it used to be so much easier when we just had the four corners, but now it's mostly the same, but there's a little bit of changes. And so roughly we're the southeast side of the city, about where Lake and Lucerne intersects with Dixie Highway. We're southeast of that. And then there's a little cutouts in the different corners because we had to meet numbers when we went through that process. So the district does include our downtown, which has some of the best restaurants and bars in the county. I want to comment about the alluding, there's a lot of mistruths in this apparently. And one of the comments is that I don't have a presence downtown. That's clearly not true. Maybe it depends on what business it is. I can't necessarily help everyone through their permitting issues because often or not, there's more to the story, right? There's unpermitted work. There's something else to the story that it's not necessarily appropriate for an elected official to step in and get involved. That's why we have organizational structure. That's why we have staff, which I've been critical in making changes to, which I know, I don't know about Anthony, if you cared or not, but I know Mr. Richter definitely protested some of the changes in the past, which now largely are accepted as the better thing for the city because in terms of efficiency. So yes, there is improvement. We do have the downtown. We also have our beach complex. One of the business owners is actually a close family friend of mine. I've known him since I was a kid. My dad was a mechanic and he used to fix his old cars. So this notion that I haven't been around is just kind of absurd to me because I grew up here. I went to school here. You guys remember this was the theme in my first campaign where many people tried to say that I'm not from here because I'm a renter. Mr. Richter was involved in that kind of messaging. Clearly that's been proven false multiple times. And that's largely because I represent the hidden majority, right? It's no secret that our city nearly 50%. That's not even an exaggeration. Nearly 50% of our city is Hispanic descent. And then on top of that, we have a very large number of Haitian descent. A lot of immigrants, a lot of people like me who are first or second generation born. And quite frankly, these communities, you know, there's often this notion of, well, where am I? Where's Commissioner Diaz? He's not on Facebook. He's not on social media enough. Well, look at your Facebook pages. Look at the neighborhood association meetings. That represents certainly a very important aspect of our community, but there's a larger majority that isn't represented at these meetings or on social media. Look at your Facebook page. Look at your friends group. How many of your Hispanic neighbors who are Central American who don't speak English are representative on that list? Quite frankly, we tend to get comfortable in our bubble and we overlook the rest of the community. And so a good majority of our district is that community. And I'm trying to listen to all the voices and be as effective as I can. And I feel and I feel being, you know, the son of immigrants.
Please wrap it up, Reinaldo. Please wrap it up.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel being from that community. I think I'm like the third or fourth person who's been a commissioner. I think I represent us fairly well in that regard.
Okay. I just have one. I have one question. I just need a one sentence answer to that. Is your district, the district you're representing, mostly residential or mostly business?
It's mostly residential, although I pretty much include our district pretty much has almost the entirety of the downtown right now, and it has our beach complex, which is business-wise, that's where most of the money is. And then along Dixie, we have a good amount of businesses down there.
That's
Okay.
enough.
Yeah.
That's great. And so Anthony, you have your hand up. You wanted to respond to something there?
Yeah, I just wanted to, touch on one point. A challenge for the Hispanic and Haitian community in Lake Worth Beach is affordable housing, preserving their single-family homes. I'm just curious because when the city presented a change to our municipal code to make it easier for developers to come in and replace single-family houses in the Dixie Highway West corridor, specifically to attract developers to assemble those properties and turn them into other developments, why would you have voted for that, Reinaldo? Why vote for gentrification of the people who you're trying to protect or say you're representing?
Yeah, Mr. Diaz?
I'd be happy to answer that. So I believe he's referencing a definition change to what our city considers a townhouse. And so which one are you specifically mentioning then?
Where William Waters said that you guys were reducing the maximum frontage needed to replace single family with a multi-unit development.
That's so that is a again, there's so much more, so many half-truths in this interview. It's frustrating. So there's been a couple issues like that, like the townhome one. Another one is our use of ADUs and single-family districts. And quite frankly, some of those policy changes were brought up under not great circumstances, and they really don't, Mr. Segrich is using the word gentrification, which is pretty bold on his regard, because him and his treasurer, Michael Coelho, who also owns a bunch of Airbnbs and short-term rentals, right? They're the gentrifiers. They want to encourage investors to come in to buy houses in cash over value so that they could do work for them and turn them into short-term rental businesses. And I think that would be okay if we could have balance, but we don't have that opportunity. It's been explained to Mr. Segrich multiple times by our staff, by our legal, why that can't happen. He refuses to accept the answer. At one point, he even acquired an attorney to provide comment. I forget who it was. He described himself as a boutique law firm who provided a comment on this issue, on the short-term rental issue, at a meeting, and said, threatened a lawsuit, I believe, said we were wrong, this and that. And then coincidentally, we never heard from them again. And that's because the legal argument is that Mr. Segrich is presenting is just not there. It's been explained to him multiple times, and he just refuses to take the answer. And so I am against gentrification. And that's why when we go through public hearings and we deal with large development projects, I ask questions, and I do my job as a representative elected in a quasi-judicial hearing to ask the questions that the community wants to be heard to make sure these projects are good for our community. And this notion of we are getting in the way of progress and we're delay, what he's really saying is we're asking questions. We asked the Gulfstream development, hey, prove to us why 20-year of tax abatement, which is going to cost us a significant portion of money, how is that going to really benefit us? Show us the numbers, show us the work. They took that as a delay because they want us to bend over backwards and allow developers to come into town and do what they want, because I don't know, Florida history, developers come to Florida and are going to save us from who knows
Sure.
what.
Yeah, I think we've got that. Listen,
Yeah.
I don't want to continue this too much longer, but Anthony, I would like to give you 30 seconds to respond to what Mr. Diaz just said.
Sure. The change in the code that I'm referring to, our Director of Community Sustainability specifically said they were changing it because the original code was to attract developers to radically change that particular area. And he said it wasn't happening fast enough. So we're going to make it easier on them. That's the very definition of gentrification. In terms of, the short-term rentals and trying to paint us as gentrifiers, the majority of short-term rental owners are homeowners, your neighbors, just like me, just like Greg. We're purchasing one unit, we're getting mortgages, we're using it to feed our families. Are there large-scale developers? Yeah, but the market squeezes them out. In Lake Worth Beach, the number of short-term rental represents under 3% of the housing stock. Please explain to me how under 3% of something has such a massive effect on the other 97%. The truth is it doesn't. We are bringing jobs. We pay our cleaners over $50 an hour. We are being real livable wages to people within our community. We are bringing business to the downtown. We're not this massive evil group of people coming in buying 3, 4, 6 properties at a time. We're homeowners like everybody else who are just trying to get by in this economy where prices have skyrocketed, property values have made things unattainable, taxes and insurance make it almost impossible to live here. We're doing what we can do to feed our families and stay here in this wonderful city.
Great. Thanks. I appreciate it. Mr. Richter, moving on to another issue. Prosper Lake Work was involved in some pretty controversial flyers about a year ago. They were widely criticized for showing photos of what appeared to be homeless people who were either deeply drugged or overdosing. Are you involved in Prosper Lake Worth? And if so, do you think the flyers were appropriate? I mean, I think this has special resonance because this would have been in the downtown area. So,
I was involved in Prosper Lake Worth in getting the Gulfstream built and putting the billboards up on the highway. And this was a group of volunteers. It was a loose group of volunteers. We raised money. We put the billboard up. We worked on bennies on the beach when the city drug negotiations out over 6 months with bennies. And to Reinaldo's credit, when he heard from the people, he did go over there and hammer out an agreement. I give Reinaldo all the credit for that. As far as the flyers go, they formed a PAC, and I went to one meeting in the PAC and saw where this was going, and I have left. Now, I know some of my money that I'd given the Prosper Lake Work went into that PAC, but I can tell you, and Reinaldo has been told by members of that group that I had walked out on them, and the first I heard about these flyers were when I was a couple days after they came out. I never even got one because I live in that district. And I denounced them, and it was awful. was terrible.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, I mean, and I don't condone that type of activity.
Yeah.
This is a neighbor, this is a city election. You know, we're all neighbors here. I mean, Anthony and I live down the street from one another. We've had our issues on short-term rentals, but we've also tried to come together and go to the city with, you know, trying to address, you know, the issues here. So, and that's how you do it. You know, you don't do it by sitting there and attacking each other and defaming them. Ronaldo mentioned something about whether he lived here or not. I was part of some group about that. It was very simple. If you looked at Ronaldo's paperwork, his ID said he lived out in Lake Worth corridor, not in the city of Lake Worth. And that was the question people asked. Did he live here 6 months before his filing? And we don't really know. But that was the only reason people ask is what he provided to the city.
Mhm. Yeah. Reinaldo, would you like to
Can I address
respond
one
to
other
that?
thing? Can I address one other thing that was brought up about
Sure.
the golf, the FDOT situation? Yeah, the owners of the Gulf Stream admit they were warned and they didn't put it in enough ahead of time. But what they have asked FDOT is, okay, we understand, we get it. You'll probably be done in June. Could you at least tell us if our paperwork is correct? So come June, we don't sit there and have to make corrections to it. Let us know what is correct. They've asked the city manager, which our temporary city manager, to get involved, to just go ask FDOT if the permits are okay, if they've done everything right. That's all they're asking right now. And nobody is getting back to them on that. And if I were sitting in as commissioner, FDOT would hear from me about that. Just tell us if it's right or wrong.
Okay. Thank you. And Reinaldo, if you'd address the address question.
Yeah, it's quite simple. A lot of us who don't own property, who are renters, and unfortunately, because we're chasing the ever increasing rents, we have to move around. And so a lot of us maintained, or used to, I don't anymore now that we're more stable, used to maintain our mailing address like at our parents' house, right? And there's a really nice statistic out there on people's driver's license where it's something absurd. It's something like 40% of people don't have an updated address on their driver's license. So that's a fairly common issue, but it was kicked to death. It was brought up multiple times. My leases were provided. Palm Beach posted a background check on all of us. So many things were looked into. It was just a tired kind of birther conspiracy. And that was that. In regards to Prosper Lake Worth, Mr. Richter is close personal friends with Peggy Fisher, who runs that PAC. They attend meetings together. They communicate regularly. It's very obvious. You see them out in the community, just like I'm out in the community together all the time. And he, after the outcry, I don't think I saw him ever denounce those mailers. I do know, I will give him this credit though. In my conversations with Mr. Richter, in regards to things like overdose support and people in those situations, he is definitely much more sensitive to that than a lot of other people. In regards to the Benny's lease, I get along really well with the owner of Benny's. I literally got married at his place. And, in terms of making good decisions for the city, the reason why that first amendment, that first offer was voted down is because negotiations were not being held adequately by our city manager at the time and staff. And on top of that, the deal would have given very very below sub-market rent to a tenant at our most valuable real estate in the city. And I'm just not for giving things away anymore. And even with the increase that we could get out of the contract that limited us on what we could and couldn't do, even with that increase, what Mr. Richter and Mr. Segrich probably aren't going to highlight. Well, I don't know, Mr. Segrich, I don't know Anthony's position on this, but what Mr. Richter won't highlight and what they didn't point out when they did their protests and whatnot is that in our last budget in October, we had to move nearly $250,000 to our beach fund because it was underfunded. Why is it underfunded? Because for years, our city hasn't been charging the appropriate rates for rent and requiring developers and, to pay fees, to pay their due and contribute to the city in a very real way. We can't give the shirt off our backs. We can't give away the kitchen sink and expect good things to happen to us.
Okay, thank you. Jeez. Pat, did you have more questions?
No.
I had a couple of real quick ones for both Mr. Segrich and Mr. Richter. First off, to both of you, we can start with Mr. Segrich. Have any current commissioners endorsed your campaign?
I work closely with the commissioners. No current commissioners have officially endorsed me.
Okay, and Mr. Richter, same question.
No, I'm good friends with several of them, but I really don't want them endorsing me, because what if I don't win? Then they got to be on the dais with somebody, that they didn't endorse. I just don't think commissioners nor the mayor should be endorsing people.
That's fair enough. Mr. Segrich, on your questionnaire, we asked, what makes you different than your opponents? We asked that obviously to all of them, but specifically on your questionnaire, you had a lot of issues with Mr. Diaz that I think we've already hashed out a lot of. But on Mr. Richter, you said that he has his heart in the right place for Lake Worth Beach. There are two areas of contrast: temperament and work ethic. There are clear examples at city commission meetings, neighborhood meetings, and personal confrontations with neighbors of Greg losing his cool and bullying those that do not agree with him or support him. I believe in seeing all sides of an issue from an objective lens. Could you be more specific about what exactly you're talking about there?
So I've been approached by several of my supporters who've had interactions with Greg in the campaign that have felt uncomfortable. They felt pressured and uncomfortable in the interaction. It was spurred, where people put out signs for my support. And Greg's a very forward and direct guy, and he goes out and gets to them face to face, and they felt very uncomfortable with those interactions. There have been a couple. Greg is very passionate, and I think sometimes his passion can get the best of him in the meetings. And on the dais, we need to be able to disagree. We need to be able to disagree in a civil manner. And we need to be able to see all sides. And sometimes our passions can blind us to doing that. So, in terms of work ethic, it's about getting to the root of the issues. It's about doing the research, about diving into the code, about diving into the laws, exploring the meaning of things, and not necessarily taking what staff gives us at face value. And as an individual, that's an area where I do that a lot.
Okay. Mr. Richter, would you like to respond to Mr. Segrich's highlight of your temperament, your demeanor, what have you?
Oh no, I think it's fair. And there was a word in there he used, and that I am passionate. Now, first of all, you can't see this. I'm 6'6", so I think are 6'5", and I think that in itself can be intimidating to people. The only time I've really, if I got in someone's face, it's usually because they've abused someone else, and and when you have volunteers that are in doing something, and someone just comes in who because they don't like something and starts bullying him or disrupting the meeting. Yes, I will speak up, and I will get in. I will. I'm very passionate about it. But I also, I also believe that, doing this job, we are such a polarized society now. Half the people aren't going to agree with you. You have to, I understand you have to live with that, because look at our elections. That, that's the way it is. I also believe that, I believe it was Ben Franklin once said, if the majority are always right, there would be no progress. But I've also been very, very, very involved with the city for 7.5 years, not just because I want to run for office. People are going to hear about me. People have heard about me for 7 years, being involved here. And I make no apologies for that.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Diaz, you put your hand up icon there. I assume you had something you wanted to add. I also would like you to address campaign financing. Both Mr. Richter and Mr. Segrich have raised about $7,500 according to their latest campaign finance reports. We will stipulate that under Richter, $3,500 was loans and $1,800 for Mr. Segrich, but that still accounts for several $1,000s raised for each of them. Your latest campaign finance report says you've raised $400 from yourself and no other money. Does this show a lack of support in your community for your campaign?
Not at all. Things have been behind schedule because of my surgery and other health things I've been dealing with, but things are all going. People have reached out. It is happening. Typically, like my previous campaign, you'll see that it's a strictly grassroots. I don't have big money. I don't have businesses necessarily. I generally don't want that. I generally don't want local businesses to donate to me because, quite frankly, I represent them, and you know what the great area I'm getting at. So I am very proud that I run a very largely volunteer / grassroots campaign, and this round is going to be no different. I do want to touch on the temperament issue. He is a big guy. I like Greg. I think he looks like Santa Claus. You can't see that. I don't necessarily consider him threatening, maybe because I'm not super small myself either. I can get where that happens, but to Greg's credit, he does apologize after the fact. There have been a number of instances, and quite frankly, I've heard those comments too. I always take things a little bit with a grain of salt. There's always more to the story. But there are the things that happen to me directly and things that have happened publicly. There has been at City Commission, at least one City Commission meeting where Mr. Richter had shouted at somebody who provided a comment. I don't even remember what the issue was. There's another person who's in the community. She made a comment. He disagreed with it. So he shouted from the back of the room, "You're an awful person." And it was a disturbance during the commission meeting. He did come up to the podium after and apologize. But as you know, in politics, that's kind of risky. You don't often, that apology doesn't always mean everything that you think it means, to yourself. And then there's things that have happened to me, or maybe not necessarily to me directly, but we had a meeting a while ago when my wife, when she was pregnant, she was about 7-8 months pregnant, and we were attending, it was like a workshop on something, mobility or something that we were attending, and he was there. And she came up to me distraught during that meeting because when she wasn't around me, or maybe I was speaking or something, Mr. Richter approached her and made a comment that if I supported a project that was being talked about, which I didn't comment on because, again, ex parte communication, he said that if I support that project, that he knows people that they're going to call whatever CPS or whatever it's called, Child Protective Services, on us on our baby, and because we can't live, because that person was a slumlord, and he can't have us living in conditions like that. And after the fact, he came to me after I pointed that out and apologized to me, and I said, look, you don't need to apologize to me. You need to apologize to the 7-month-old pregnant woman who is, who,
Okay.
even though it was a joke, as you claim, it was not a good joke, not an appropriate thing, and it's
Okay.
not something that you would say to the public.
Getting far afield from what the question was about. I don't even remember what the question was, but Mr. Diaz, I'm going to ask you, let's see how far we're running out of time, but let's see how much ground we can cover here. I'm going to ask you a series of yes or no questions, and I'll let you elaborate if need be, but I'd like some yes or no answers to something. Do you think Prosper Lake Worth, that political committee, will be a factor in this upcoming election?
Absolutely, yes.
Do you consider Prosper Lake Worth to be an ally of yours, or are they coming after you?
Definitely not. They have a target on my back.
Okay. In the last election, Prosper Lake Worth was credited or blamed, depending upon your point of view, with getting Sarah Maliga and Mimi May elected to the city commission. Am I right about that?
Yes, at least Mimi May, for sure.
Okay, so they've got a track record of being effective. What are you going to do about the fact that Prosper Lake Worth has a target on your back?
Well, clearly things have changed. Generally with a grassroots campaign, we run for things, not against. But as evident by this meeting, I'm going to have to be far more defensive, and I'm okay with that. You guys know I've sat in a hot seat before, Big Sugar, developers, FWC, name it. I'm prepared to respond with no matter what mistruths or whatever is going to be said. I will, just do what I have to do, and I hope and I expect our community to kind of see through it. They learned over what happened with those mailers on the last round, and hopefully this time people are going to see through it.
Okay. And tell us very briefly, tell us why you said it rhetorically, but I'd like a little bit of elaboration. Why would any group, well, let's talk about Prosper Lake Worth. Why do they have a quote target on your back? Why is that?
Well, back to when I said, when I ask questions, it's often interpreted or being said that I'm delaying progress. I'm getting in the way of these developers from doing what they need to do to save our towns. That's really what it comes down to. The people who are involved are real estate people. They don't like regulation. They want unfettered development because it's good for them, for sure.
Mhm.
That doesn't always reflect that it's good for the community. And they intend to get as many people on the commission to vote yes on those projects as quickly as possible.
Okay. Mr. Segrich, briefly. Anthony, did you support and vote for the change from citywide to single-member district voting in Lake Worth Beach?
Supported. And yes, I voted for it.
Okay. Do you also think that Prosper Lake Worth is going to be a factor in the upcoming elections in terms of trying to influence voters?
I think it'll probably be more of a factor in the other districts. I personally have not seen much in the way of influence in the District 4 election thus far.
Okay. Enlighten us. Tell us why it would be more of a factor in the other district race than in yours.
I think there's a clear candidate that they would be supporting in that election.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. All right. We've gone past the hour, so I think we should wrap things up here. I appreciate all of you. Somebody had to have the last word, and that was it. But I want to reemphasize that thanks for the questionnaires. I encourage each of you to respond with supplemental. Send us an email. Elaborate on something that was said that you think needs further, amplification. We'd like to see. We won't necessarily see them ourselves, even though both Dan and Pat both live in Palm Beach County. We'd like to see your mailers. We'd like to see the messaging that you're doing to try to reach the voters in District 4. So with that, thanks to all three of you for being here today very much.